What is up, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Robeytech. Why is it special? Because this one is brought to you by Deepcool. This is one of our infamous step-by-step guides. Now, why is it infamous? Because over 2 million of you have watched our step-by-step guides, and we haven't done one in a mini ITX case or small form factor-ish case like something like this. So thanks to the fine folks at Deepcool, we're going to be doing one in the MacCube 110 today. One thing I always want to cut in there, this is a full build guide. And because it is a full build guide, that means that you feel free to look down in the description below, find the individual table of contents links, and jump in between them. This is going to be anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes, more than likely. And of course, you can watch the entire thing. It's amazing. It will change your life. We have been told that watching these do make you younger and more attractive. But if you don't feel like having that special magical power brought upon you, feel free to just move throughout the video and use them and replay them as you see fit to help you build the PC. Now, unlike all of my other specifically very targeted step-by-step guides, this one is going to be more generic. Now, the things that are going to be very specific to this particular build are going to be obviously the case, the AiO, and in some ways the PSU, because those are all Deepcool specific, but everything else, we're going to try and show you generically what you should do. Not only are we going to talk about how to install the AiO for both Ryzen and Intel, outside of that, generically, everything else you can switch out the parts. Now, we'll talk about what you need should you not follow this guide specifically. And also, I went ahead and down in the description below, put a bunch of different price options. So should you want to price this out differently, so you can look at $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, or $2,500 version of this build, all listed out below. So try to make this as neutral, part neutral as possible. Hopefully this is something that you'll be able to use moving forward anytime you want to use this particular case, and you can just follow along using your own motherboard guides, etc. moving forward. Let's walk through the parts now. You can replace most of these. And so we'll walk through what we're going to be using, and then of course, what you need to do to basically choose your own part. For CPU, we chose the Intel 10th Gen Core i7 10700K. The 10700K, more than capable CPU, is actually my runner-up for the best of 2020 CPUs. It's the equivalent of a 9th Gen 9900K. Great CPU, great price. If you want to spend a little bit more, you can get a 10850 or even a 10900, but right now, really good bang for buck. For our motherboard, we haven't got to use one of these a lot. We're using the ROG Strix Z490G Gaming Mini ITX. Overall, allows 4 sticks of RAM, perfect for a case like this. If you want to go smaller, you are capable. You can go all the way down to micro ATX, mini ITX. All of those things are options with this particular case. Does look a little bit funky. Trust me, we almost did an entire build just using a smaller motherboard. But yeah, in terms of the perfect size for this, a micro ATX motherboard like this, of which there are other options, but we're gonna go with the ROG Strix Z490E. For the AiO, we're gonna be using the Deepcool Castle 240EX. We are not going to be using the stock fans that are included in this because we want everything to look pretty, because RGB obviously makes everything look awesome. So we're gonna be replacing that with these MF120 GT fans. In fact, these MF120 GTs we'll be using throughout the entire build to fill up all of the slots for this cases. And we'll talk a little bit about what you have to do if you're going to replace those fans with this AiO later on. For RAM, we're gonna be using Crucial Ballistics RGB. Just really like the way this stuff looks. Overall, great RAM kit. I love Crucial. It's one of some of the best RAM you can get out there, and just really kind of simplistic in terms of the RAM options. We're trying to stay away from something that was more like if you want to do like all Corsair, etc. Given that we're using Deepcool, a lot of Deepcool parts, we wanted to have most of the RGB driven from the motherboard, and so that's why we're choosing things like G.Skill, Crucial, etc. for that. So that's our RAM right there. For M.2, one of my favorites, the Western Digital SN550. Of course, you can choose any option that you want here, but for us, we wanted to show you how to install an M.2, make sure that you get that installed easily, and show you where to put those in there. It's actually have a couple options for M.2 installation here, but we'll show you where those are later on. For an SSD, just because we want to show you where to put these in, we went ahead and did the Seagate FireCuda 120. Love these very fast gaming SSDs. They look really great. They've got a great logo on them. Very fast for gaming storage. Should you want to do an option like that, we wanted to show you how to put it in. For our GPU, just because we wanted to kind of do something that was a little bit more approachable, we did the EVGA GeForce RTX 3070 XC3 Ultra. EVGA is probably one of my top choices in terms of GPU choices. This is a great 3070. It's not top tier, it's kind of in between. And so when we talked about a build, it was like, you know, pretty attainable. This felt like a great GPU choice, should you be able to get a hold of one right now. And then finally, for power supply, we're gonna be using the Deepcool DQ 850M-V2L. That's right, that is a mouthful and a tongue twister because it just makes me want ice cream, if you know what Dairy Queen is, so DQ. But overall, 850 watts, more than enough power for a 3070 or a 3080. So should you upgrade to a 3080, you want to use something that had plenty of headroom for power, and then overall great PSU. Also plenty efficient with 80 plus gold. And worth checking out. One other thing that we forgot to add that I always talk about, and these are gonna be optional, but we will show you how to use cable extensions. We're gonna use Asia Horse for ours, but feel free to use whichever ones you want to, unless you're doing a full sleeved, which work a little bit different. These plug into the PSU cable specifically. So we'll show you how to do it with or without these, but anywhere between $25 and $45. These make such a massive difference in terms of how a build looks. And we'll show you a little bit about that when we get later on in the build. Obviously, with this build being brought to you by the fine folks at Deepcool, we're gonna use as many of their parts as humanly possible when doing this build. So now let's talk about what parts you need when building the PC. Well, first and foremost, you want a screwdriver. Something just like this. If you've watched my original video, this is called Excalibur. I've had this particular screwdriver since like Windows XP, so it's very, very old. Magnetic is useful, and we'll talk a little bit about why, just because being able to get out screws or hold screws while you're basically installing components is very, very nice. It will not damage the components. Trust me, it'll make your whole life a whole lot easier. The other option that you also have is kits like this, and no, this is not sponsored, but from iFixit. iFixit kits have a ton of different screw heads. This one specifically is for when I do M.2s, etc. You can never go wrong with having these particular kits. They have things like extensions and all that sort of stuff. So if you're gonna get into hardcore building and this can be used for a lot of different options, I would recommend getting a nice set like this. And then it's also got like a screw holder, which is kind of cool. Finally, you're gonna need some cable management solutions here. So here we've got Velcro ties, we've got zip ties, and then these right here are for cutting zip ties after we use them. Though some of this stuff might be optional, again, it goes a long way towards making sure that a build itself actually ends up looking pretty incredible. So using zip ties, stuff like this to basically do cable management when we get to that part is gonna be pretty important. And so finding a buffer, these are fairly inexpensive and go a long way towards making a build look really great. And you can get these from any hardware store. You can just get the standard cable cutters as well. I like these because they're a little easier to get in there and they're bent a certain way, so which is pretty nice. And then this is kind of an optional thing, but I always like to have it on hand because should something go wrong, is isopropyl alcohol, thermal paste, and these are called paper towels, Roby. Paper towels. If you have an issue as you're installing your cooler, should you need to remove it and reapply, the Deepcool Castle 240 does actually come with thermal paste, but should you have an issue or you need to remove it, you need to be able to take off the thermal paste. So you do that with isopropyl alcohol, just dabbing it on a paper towel and then rubbing it off. There's lots of videos that show you how to basically do that. So having these on hand, should you have an error, because Murphy's Law being is that if you don't, then you'll end up needing them. If you do, well, then you now have a free use of isopropyl alcohol and paper towels. And then finally, thermal paste. If you just want to get your cooling just a little bit better, you also have the option of applying third-party thermal paste. They have a tendency to perform a little bit better than what you might have on the one that comes stock with a lot of AiOs. And then this right here is a thermal paste spreader. Big thing for this is just making sure you get a super light, even layer on your CPU. And so these are a couple optional tools, but good things to have on hand should you decide that you're gonna wanna do a full build. Now, finally, the last part is a nice, clean, empty space to basically do your setup. Now here I have an anti-static mat. Depending on when you're watching this, if you want to head over to newegg.com/Robeytech, we may have these on sale. Depending on where you're watching, if you're looking for something like this, these are things you can buy from us. This one specifically I got from Newegg. I am on an anti-static floor mat, but again, you want some place that's usually like a dining room table away from a lot of static. And though it takes a lot of static to actually hurt PC components, having something like this just makes it a whole lot easier, gives you peace of mind, and keeps you from thinking, man, did I fry this, etc. So just a nice open place just like this, or a mat like this, would be absolutely great. And hopefully maybe you pick up one of ours if you want to check that out. So that is it. That's what you need for the build. Let's go ahead and get the motherboard prepped. Okay, so let's talk about the parts that you need when you have your motherboard. And we're also gonna take some time and just walk you through the individual parts on a motherboard. The main reason being is that we want you to kind of understand as we're walking through, it makes it a little easier for you. It makes it a little easier for you to kind of follow along as we're doing the build. Now, before I get too far, I want to show you this. This, if you have one of these in your motherboard bag, is a Wi-Fi antenna. If your motherboard has Wi-Fi and you're like, oh, it's gonna work out of the box, you actually need to hook this up. There's two little screws. They connect to these two screws on the back. We're showing them there right there. They connect to these two screws on the back. And then this allows you to actually get Wi-Fi. If you don't plug this in, you'll see Wi-Fi signal, but it'll be very, very weak. Okay, so other things that you will need specifically for this build is you will need these super tiny, there they are, these super tiny M.2 standoffs. We'll show you how to install these when we do the M.2, but you'll need these out of the box. You'll also need this. These are your SATA cables. If you're gonna plug in hard drives and we're gonna be plugging in an SSD, you'll need these as well. If you're not gonna be plugging that in and you're only gonna do an M.2 drive, this will not be necessary. The last thing you'll need out of the box is this thing, especially if you're not going to be using our particular motherboard. So say for instance, you're using like the B550 AMD version of this. If you wanna follow along, we're gonna point through things inside of this awesome book, your label and location for the parts that I'm gonna highlight on your particular motherboard. So if you're using a different motherboard, or even if you're using ours, have this handy. I use it all the time, and I've built like, what, 300 or 400 PCs. Always a good thing to have on hand when you're basically doing a PC installation. So let's talk through the parts that are on the motherboard. Okay, first and foremost, here in the center is our socket. This is our Intel LG 1200. If you're using an older motherboard like a Z390, this will be a 1500. It'll look exactly the same, but given that we're using 10th gen Intel, that is the socket that we have here. If you're using AMD, you have an AM4 socket. This is the only thing that'll be different outside of a couple little brackets that you'll see on AMD. Everything else will be the same between AMD and Intel. This right here is your VRM. This is what cools your CPU and also provides it power. These little things that are along the edge are called the VRM, and these little things on top of it are the heat sinks that keep it nice and cool. Up here in the top left, this is called your EPS power connector. You have an 8-pin and a 4-pin in this case. You only need to use the 8-pin. You do not need to use the 4-pin. When you are doing things like, say for instance, your Gamer's Nexus or your Hardware Unboxed or your Jay's 2 Cents or BPS Customs, you are wildly overclocking your system. That is when you'd add an additional 4-pin power for what's called LN cooling or liquid nitrogen cooling. That's the only reason you would ever need this. If you want to, just to make it look good, plug them both in, you can, but you only actually need the 8-pin. Over here, these are your fan headers. This light gray one, and this isn't always the case on every motherboard, but this light gray one for us is the CPU header. If you're using a different board, make sure you find this header on your motherboard by looking at the motherboard box, because you're gonna need to know where this is. It's important. This is just a typical fan header. As you have more fans, you'll have to plug these things in. That's what this is for. These right here are actually called RGB headers. We have a 4-pin and a 3-pin. They are actually different voltages. Don't think that you can plug one into the other. It will actually fry them. So when you have and use the connector, if you have a 4-pin, don't plug it into a 3-pin. If you have a 3-pin, you can't plug it into a 4-pin anyway. These are your RAM slots. If you're using a mini ITX version, you've only got 2, or certain boards only have 2. In this case, we have 4. This is actually dual channel. So you have 1 channel pair here and 1 channel pair here. If you are using less than 4 DIMMs, like we're using 4, but if you're using less, make sure that you look at your motherboard manual to see which slot puts in which slot you only put in 2 or 4. Some motherboards, this one does not actually has a diagram on it, but in this case we don't, so you'll have to look at your motherboard manual. In most cases, it's A2 and B2. This is channel A, this is channel B, but make sure you reference your motherboard. This is your 24-pin ATX power supply. This powers everything else on the motherboard. This is USB-C. Which we'll show you the connection for there. This is USB 3. These down here, these are your SATA connections right here. So this is SATA. This is where we're gonna plug in hard drives, our SSD, etc. That's where we're gonna plug these in. In the very bottom here, these are your front panel connectors. Your motherboard manual will show you how the front panels work. We'll show you that in our particular case. You will need to know where this is in your, if you are using a different motherboard when we get to this part later on. Most of the time, it's in the bottom right-hand corner. These are USB 2 right here. Again, we have another fan header here, 2 more RGB headers, and then this is our HD audio. You will have to need to know where this is for your motherboard if you're using something different. Right here, these are M.2s, and you can see one has a shield and one does not. In both cases, depending on if you have a heat sink, you don't have to worry about that very much. But that's what these are. These are M.2, and then we've got a by 16 PCIe slot, a by 1, and then a by 8 PCIe slot. By 16 means it actually has all pins across the entire thing. This is where you usually plug in your GPU. By 1 might be something for like an Elgato capture card or USB. And then by 8, sometimes people will do things like Crossfire SLI, which is having 2 of these cards. But again, this has half the bandwidth. So there is some limitations in terms of that stuff. We also have, and in this case, an integrated I/O shield. Some motherboards, depending on what you bought, may not actually have this here. We will show you how to install that later on if you don't have one, but in this case, this is your I/O shield. And then these are just things like, these are USB 3, USB 2, we've got your audio. This is where I talked about connecting your Wi-Fi. You've got your LAN port, you've got USB-C, you've got an HDMI and display port. If you are having an AMD and you are not sticking in what's called an APU, and you'll know what that is, then these will not work. But on Intel, they do, because all of their CPUs usually have an integrated graphics chip. So not something we're gonna go in depth into here, but sometimes you'll see this and it may not actually work in this case. Anyway, that is your motherboard. First thing we're gonna do is peel, because that's the fun part. Peel, peel, yeah. Peel. Now we're gonna install our Intel i7 10th Gen 10700K. Now, when holding and when working with the CPU, you try very hard not to touch what's called the top part, which is called the IHS. You want to grab it from the sides. You also don't want to touch the bottom. On an AMD, you'll see a bunch of pins. If you bend the pins, that's bad. You just want to grab it from the side. That's all you want to do here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this, I'm going to pull this out to the side, lift it up, and lift it all the way. So it reveals the socket just like this. And what we're going to do is take out our CPU, grab it from the sides like so, drop it in just like that. Now, there is a little arrow, I'm just gonna show you here. There's a little arrow in the bottom left that's lined up with a little arrow there. There's also these little dimples on the side, and hopefully we're zooming in and showing you these things. These little dimples, that's how you know it's sitting there. It only sits in one way. And the text goes horizontally from left to right. On AMD, it's actually the other way, and we're gonna be showing you that here in a minute, but this is how you install it for Intel. The next thing you're gonna do, is you're gonna pull this down, have this slip underneath this little bit right here, and then you're gonna pull this tension arc to the right, underneath, and this just pops off like magic. And there you go, congratulations, you've installed a CPU. I'm so proud of you guys. Okay, so now, we're just gonna show you, now this board will not work in the case, but again, it will work for a demonstration of showing how to install an AMD CPU in this case. So just to give you a little bit different and set up the deep cool for this particular one as well. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this little slot right here and we're gonna open it up. It pops up just like that, so it goes to 90 degrees. On your AMD CPU, you'll see a little arrow on the corner right here. There's also a very small arrow in the top left corner here. Those two arrows line up. The way it's gonna work is you're gonna drop it in. The Ryzen will go horizontal, not vertical, it'll go horizontal. Just drop it in, make sure that it wiggles, and then you're just gonna pull this tension arm down. And that's how you install an AMD CPU. Now, to prepare this for a deep cool, so now let's install our RAM. In this case, we're gonna be popping up all 4 of these bad boys right here. In certain cases on certain motherboards, you may actually have to there might be little pull tabs down here as well. So just make sure you check that. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna remove our ROM, our RAM. That was just an inside joke. Look at that, Robeytech. Okay, we're gonna open up our RAM here. There we go, that one's open. And this is just, it's only like a little bit on the side, there we go. Pop these out, like waffles. Okay, so let's talk about installing RAM. So we've got 4 DIMMs right here. We're gonna set them up nicely. Look at that, 4 DIMMs of RAM. Dim cheerio. Okay, so we got 4 DIMMs of RAM. The way this is gonna work, you're gonna basically grab your RAM from the side. This right here is called the printed circuit board. You're gonna see a little slot in the RAM. You're just gonna line up that little slot like this. Just gonna pop it in. You're just gonna give it a nice, good, solid click.
Oh, do you feel that? Oh, all the way through my bones every time.
Notice I'm giving it good pressure. You do not need to worry about bending the board. Our RAM is installed. M.2 time, SN550, Say that 50,000 times fast, Josh. So we've got our little M.2 out here. Just given the blue color, we're going to go ahead and hide this. Not that I have anything against blue, just trying to keep it aesthetically pleasing. So you've got two options here. You've got one with a shield, one without. You do not need to worry about which one you choose. All in all, this will dissipate heat, and if given that it's out in the air, this will also dissipate heat, so you won't have to worry about any thermal throttling in either one of these cases. So first thing we're gonna do is grab this, pop it out, pop it out. And there we go. Now, remember those little tiny M.2 screws we were talking about earlier? There are our itty bitty screws that we have. And what you'll need is you'll need one pair of each of these. So there you go. This is what you'll actually need for a complete M.2 installation. Just like that. You've got your M.2, you've got a standoff, and you've got an itty bitty screw. Now here at the top, you'll see we have 3 of these little standoffs. They actually have numbers underneath them: 2280, 2260, 2242. Those are actually millimeter lengths. These are 80 millimeters, so we're going to stack our standoff in the 80 millimeter spot. Just tighten it until it's, hand tight. And we're gonna take our little M.2. There's a little slot in the PCB. Remember, PCB stands for printed circuit board. Just gonna pop that in just like so. And then you're gonna take your itty bitty screwdriver and your itty bitty screw, noticing a theme here. I'm gonna pop that down like that. I'm just gonna screw it in. Boom, and you are ready. Now, because you did the shield and we wanted to show you like a complete process, you're gonna do here is you're gonna go ahead and take this and peel it off. Nice peel. Now this is called a thermal pad. And what this does is this transfers heat between the M.2 and the shield here at the top. You know that you've got this in the right orientation because the M.2 is written the right way. You're just gonna pop that on top. It's gonna just line it up. Sometimes looking at it from the side is a good idea. Line it up and then just screw it down. Now, pro tip for me, something I always do. If you have a spare one of these little screws, I go ahead and install them and set them in. Main reason being is that they have a tendency to get lost. So I will screw it all the way in. We're just gonna go and pop that in there. And that way you won't lose that. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop this down. And should I install another M.2, I've got it all set up for it. Now that we've got the motherboard ready, something that is unique about the Deepcool Castle 240EX is just how you have to mount the AiO. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're actually going to get the AiO mounted while the motherboard is outside of the case because it makes it much easier to put inside. And I'll show you a little bit why when we talk about the mounting mechanism. So what we're gonna do now is actually put together our AiO. So inside of your Deepcool Castle 240EX, you actually have your radiator and your pump, which is attached. Now, this one does not have thermal paste in it. That's because I've used this before. So if you have this new, you'll see like a gray square right here that has pre-applied thermal paste. Just to make this video more comprehensive, we're gonna go ahead and install thermal paste and we'll show you how to do that. But if you have this new, you do not need to worry about that. It is actually built on. Inside of here is all the accessories for your Deepcool Castle 240EX. We'll talk about that. And then you've got 2 fans. Now remember, in our case, we're not gonna be using these, but if you end up using these fans, everything you need is included in this box to set up your Deepcool. If you are going to replace the fans with the ones we're going to do, there are going to be screws you don't need, and I'll show you those here in a minute. So what we have inside here is this right here. This bag has everything that you need to control the RGB and power for the Deepcool Castle pump. If you're using Intel or AMD, they actually have bags that are marked for it. So we're gonna be using Intel in this case. We actually will also show you how to install AMD. So don't worry, we got you covered for this. The thing that we are not gonna show is how to install what's called TR4 or Threadripper. So we're not showing you Threadripper in this one, but it does include stuff for Threadripper as well. This right here is a additional, allows you to do a custom like logo inside of the Deepcool Castle. There's instructions on their site on how to basically do that stuff, but that's what this is for. And then these are all of your screws for screwing in both the fans and the AiO and radiator to your case. This back plate, you can see that it actually says Intel and AMD. We'll show you how to basically set this up for whichever one you're going to do. If you're using AM4, you will not need to use this, but given that we are using Intel, we will have to use this. So if you're using a newer Ryzen chip, you don't have to worry about this. And then finally, you've got a little badge, and then these are the little components we need to make our backplate. So we're gonna get into building the AiO, then we'll build the backplate. So let's get our bracket set up. Basically, you wanna set it up just like this. What you have is one little peg, one little black thing per individual corner. You want the Intel facing up towards you. What you're gonna do is you're gonna pick this up and you're gonna put one of these little pegs in each little corner. Now, they have to sit flat, so you gotta twist it till it goes all the way flat like this. You're gonna take one of these little black pieces, and there's a little little notch here that you have through here, and you're just gonna push that until it's all the way on. You're gonna rinse and repeat that process. Again, inside slot, twist until it's all the way down, and then pop it all the way on. You're gonna do that across and around all 4 of these. Just like that. That should go on easily. There you go, set up. What you're gonna do is you're gonna grab your motherboard, and you're just gonna slip this in just like this, holding it down. And then what I do is I slip it on, and then now your motherboard is ready to mount your AiO. So you got your 4 pegs and you're ready to go. So now we're going to set up and install our AiO. The way that you want to basically have this set up for, if you want to mimic what I'm doing, is you want to have your orientation like this, okay? And then what's going to happen is you are going to have your fans set up like this, okay? So you basically have your pump cables off to the right-hand side, and then you have the fan, basically your fan cables pointing towards you. Now, if you are using these, in this case, we're using the MF120 GTs, so you have to use the long screws that come with the MF120 GT. If you're using the stock fans, you can use the ones that actually are included in your AiO. But given these are a little bit higher, a little bit taller, we have to use their screws. Grab our screwdriver, and then you're just gonna screw these in each corner. And the way that I do this is just basically do them in opposite corners first, just to get them in and set up. Okay, and then once those are in, just screw them all the way down. Okay, then you're just gonna take your other screws, set them in like that, and you are good to go. That is now ready. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna install our bracket for our Intel. The things you're gonna need for that are you're gonna need the 2 Intel brackets, and you'll need these 4 little screws. You're going to take off the bottom like so. And you will have thermal paste here, so definitely be careful. And then basically there's little divots in here. That's where the screw heads are gonna go. You're gonna stick this with the tubes off to the right. You're gonna stick these little divots in. There's like a little slot right here, and you're gonna pop that up just like that. And then you're going to take your screwdriver. You're gonna screw it in on each side. So trying not to touch the cold plate, because you have thermal paste here in your case. So again, you're gonna put that on each side. Okay, same thing with the bottom. Again, lining up like this. And now your pump is ready to install. If you want to put your own thermal paste on, let's show you how to do this. The things that I have is I have my thermal paste, my TM30 from Corsair, and I've got a thermal paste spreader. You do not need to use this, but I like to use this. What you're gonna do if you're not going to spread it, you just wanna put about a grain of rice size bit of thermal paste, just like that, onto your IHS, just like I've done. But if you're OCD like me, then you wanna Bob Ross it a bit. So you can use a thermal paste spreader and give a nice even layer on the IHS, which is always like a little bit better. So I'm gonna cautiously and carefully spread this onto the top of the IHS. There we go, painted our beautiful IHS in thermal gray with a nice even layer. Now, I talked a little bit about why I'm gonna do this outside of the case, and the main reason being is that you have to apply pressure to these outside brackets to put this on. So when this is installed in the case, it actually gets a little hard to do that. And so I'm trying to make it as easy for you as possible. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna move our pump like so, place it on top of the screws. So it's like that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take these little screws, which you have 4. You're gonna start putting these on each corner. Might actually be easier. I would recommend it's easier to do it with a screwdriver, especially if a magnetic screwdriver. So once it kind of gets to the point where it's holding it down evenly is where I stop. You're gonna do that in each corner. And you're gonna go opposite corners just like you typically would. You wanna apply even pressure across. There we go, just like that. And then again, opposite corners, tighten them until the screwdriver just doesn't catch, nothing too crazy. AiO is installed, and we're gonna take this little cable right here, and you'll see it looks like a little fan header. Take that little cable and we're gonna put it into the light gray or your CPU header of your motherboard. Just like that. Okay. And there you go. Okay, pump is installed, and we're now ready to put this inside of the case. You see these 2 little brackets right here? What we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the 4 screws from this bracket. So pop off the bracket just like this. So in order to install for AMD, what you're gonna need is you're gonna need these 4 little pegs right here. And there's 2 sets in there. Make sure they are the bigger of the 2. So there's a small set and then there's a bigger set. You wanna make sure you're grabbing the bigger set. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take these, and there's a fat side and a thin side. You take the fat side and you're just gonna screw it into each one of these corners. Okay, so now your bracket is basically set up. Now I am gonna show you, just for the sake, so this is gonna be a little bit different than what you did for an Intel. It'll be really hard to show on the camera. So there's a little shield in it. That's how you know the direction. This is basically, the shield's gotta be facing the right orientation. So what we're gonna do is we're basically going to install our brackets for AMD. And the way that that works is with your tubes pointing left, you're gonna pop this on like this. Now the way that you know this is the right direction is you'll see there's little divots. Inside the top with the tubes pointing to the left, you're gonna basically pop this on like this, and that's gonna go right there. These 4 little screws, and you can see they're a little divoted right here. You can see they're a little divoted. You're just gonna pop one of those in, or put it on a screwdriver like I'm gonna do. And take one of those and you're gonna screw it in, just like this. And the same thing on the other side. Okay. And then you're gonna take your bottom one, same way, pop it down, holding it just like this. Same thing, little divots are up on the top, screw it in. This pump is now set up for AMD. And then all you do is when you install this, you'll pop this down just like this, holding it straight. Then there's these 4 little screws like this. You're gonna do them on each corner. There's that one. One here at the end. Screw them down until they don't. They basically will just be, they'll just till they stop. And then you want to go in like a star pattern. There you go. So if you have an AMD board, those are the steps you're going to follow to install the Deepcool Castle AiO on an AMD. Now, let's pop back over to Intel and finish completing our build. So this is our MacCube 110. What we're gonna do is we're gonna prep it for our building inside of it. So we're just gonna strip it completely down at this point. So take off our dust filter. In the back, we're just gonna unscrew our back there. Now the front is toolless, so gotta pull it down like that. And finally, in the front, which we'll get some fans on here in a minute, let's pull these off. And there we go. In the back is all of your screws and accessories. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take that out. You're gonna untwist, detie it. Now you have all of your accessories and your things that it comes with ready to go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set everything inside the case and then we're gonna stick it on its back. And last thing we're going to do is in the back here, we're going to remove this little fan that they gave you because we're not going to use it. You are free to use it if you want, but I am not going to. So I'm just going to remove this fan because we're going to be replacing this with an MF120 GT fan. Okay, one other really cool thing is the GPU sag arm. So if you have a very heavy GPU, you can just move this up and down, or you can move it left and right, and your GPU won't sag. Now, if your motherboard, mine doesn't, but if your motherboard requires an IO shield like this, the one thing that's gonna be super important is looking at the back of your motherboard, and ensuring that you understand. You can see that the orientation needs to match. In this particular case, the tough gaming has to be the right way up. What you're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to pop this in the bottom side here, pop this all the way in around all four corners, and you're going to push hard until this is absolutely flush with the back of the case. So should you have an IO shield, that's all you got to do is make sure you pop this in before you install the motherboard and everything else, and then pop it in on all four corners. Okay, now that we have the case prepped, what we're going to do is we're going to get the AiO and we're gonna get the motherboard placed inside of it. But before we put anything inside, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna double check that our standoffs are nice and tight, just finger tight. So we're doing that with each one of these. We're gonna be using micro ATX, which is the size that we're doing for this in our motherboard. So what you wanna do with two hands, I'm gonna grab the motherboard from the VRM and you're gonna set it nicely inside of the case, okay? Just gonna slowly kind of adjust it until it's correct, like so. And you'll see, so there's a little peg right here that it'll sit in there. You just want to adjust it until it's in the center like this. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna take all of our extra little cables here, these little cables that you see right here that are attached to the fan, and you're gonna shove these through the top two holes right here. Make sure that put them in as much as you possibly can, as you kind of push the AiO down. That is what our thing is gonna look like here at the end. So we're gonna rotate this around. Okay, what you're gonna do is you're gonna grab these small screws and you're gonna do it in one of these two corners. You're gonna do the first one in this corner. AiO is sealed in. I don't tighten it all the way yet, so I can make sure I get some movement there because I wanna figure out where I have it placed, which is right here is perfect. Let's tighten these last two down. And then now we can screw in the other screws. So inside of your case is a bunch of screws that look like this, and you're looking for the screws that look just like this, and they have a little lip around the outside. And you're going to install these in your corners. So there's one right there, in the center. On the far left. So now that all of your stuff is screwed in, let's go and make sure that we have all the cables pulled down through the back. I'm gonna pull all of this stuff tight, and so it's coming out of the back here. So I've got everything coming out. We're good to go there. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna install our 3 MF120 GT fans. Okay, so there's 2 slots down at the bottom and then up at the top where you're gonna have to route the fan cables. We're gonna go ahead and pop this one in and then route it through the top here, like so. Just pulling it as tight as possible. We're gonna take our MF120 GT and you're gonna push this up as high as you possibly can. You're gonna take these they're little thick boy little thick boy screws, and you're gonna use these to screw in the 4 corners. We're gonna pop this in like this. Just do one in opposite corners first. I would route this one, because we're gonna put it in the top corner, I'd route this one up through the top as well. Okay, same thing, just one in each corner for now, just to make sure that to get it held. And then for the last one, we're going to route this from the bottom slot down here. Slip that down. Look at that, just enough room. The one thing you want to be really careful of is as you're placing your fans, that your cables aren't coming out of the edge here. There's a way to get them trapped. So as you set them in here, make sure that the cables are coming out of the side like they are in both of these cases. So we've got those 3 fans. Last fan we're going to install now is in the back. It's top left slot up here. Make sure they're all the way in. There you go. Making sure the fan is centered. All our fans are installed. And now at this point in time, outside of our 4 potential PSU screws, you shouldn't need any of the other screws from the motherboard. If you're using the same setup I am, inside of your Deepcool MF120 GT is actually one of these RGB hubs, which will actually hold 5. Given that we have what's essentially 7 RGB from Deepcool that we have to worry about, you'll actually need 2 of these, which we have 2 packs here that we'll be using. I will show you, if you're using the static fans, then what you will need is the single RGB component that comes with the AiO, which is just as easy. You'll follow the same steps, but you'll just use that part versus this right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna find all of the RGB connectors here. They look like this, and you're gonna plug these in to the individual parts here. So that one right there is for fan number 1. Over here we have 3 right here. One is some are for the fans, and some is also for the AiO. Then we have another 4th one. Let me grab one of the ones from up top here as well. Okay, so there you go. So there's 5, and those are all plugged in. Okay, and lastly, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab another one. I'm gonna plug that right into the out like this. So now it's daisy chained. You're gonna take our last 2 RGBs, and you're gonna plug that into one. And there you go. Now all RGB is hooked up. Also included in your Deepcool MF120 GTs are these fan splitters. So there's a single one plugging into a PWM, which is a fan header on the motherboard. We'll show you how to hook that up, and then 4 of these. If you do not have these, you have to plug each one of these into a fan header on the motherboard. But given that we have this many fans, we're gonna plug each of our fans into one of these. So that's what we're gonna do now. Plugging each of our fans into one of these slots, like so. So we're gonna do one for the 3 fans at the front, and then we're gonna grab the second one we're gonna do for the 3 fans at the top. And now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cut, and you will see all of this cable managed. And then I'll talk a little bit about how I cable manage it. Okay, so let's walk through just quickly what I did to make this look clean. What I'm doing is you just basically want to kind of group and route things together. And don't be afraid to use, I like to use zip ties. Some people use Velcro ties, it's up to them. But for me, it's all about getting them into clean bundles. So everything having to do with RGB was bundled together. Everything having to do with our fans was bundled together. So pretty straightforward stuff right there. Same thing over here. Again, bundled RGB, bundled fans. And then the things that I left ready to get connected to the motherboard is our PWM fan connector. And up here, we've got our RGB for all of this, which is all daisy chained together. And then finally, our PWM for our second fan connection, which we're now going to hook up our front panel connectors. The only thing we're gonna do is inside, and this is the same thing in the AiO, is a connector that looks like this. And this connector, what it does is it basically has 2 RGB connectors. And the one that we care about is the 3-pin that you can see right here. And this is, you would also use this connector if you're not using these fans and you're just using the stock AiO. On the AiO, or in this case, on the MF120 GT RGB hub, is a extra connector that looks like this. Now we've plugged ours AiO one into it, which looks like this, but in this case, we're gonna use the hub one. You're gonna plug that into the end. That's gonna allow us to basically run all of our RGB. So now all our RGB is daisy chained and ready to go. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna run everything we can down to these bottom slots down here. So first we're gonna take is our RGB. It has a little 3-pin. I'm gonna shove that down in this hole in the right. You're gonna take the one that looks like this. It actually does say HD audio. It's very hard to see, but it says HD audio on it. I'm gonna shove that down here. These little bad boys right here are all our front panel connectors. I'm gonna take these and shove these into this hole right here in the front. I'm gonna take this USB 3 right here. You're gonna put this right up there. So now let's show you if you want to install an SSD. What you're gonna do is you're gonna find these little things inside of your, comes with your case screws. What they do is they're gonna screw into each corner of your SSD like so. Now, if you had to, here we are on the top of the case, you can see these little marks. There's one here and there's one up here. I've actually taken one of them by using this for storing our RGB. So I'm gonna use this bottom slot down there. What you're gonna do is just take these and just push it in and boom, there it is. That's all it takes to basically get it installed, making sure that the connectors are pointed out in this direction. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and hook up our SSD. What you're gonna do is there's a little metal slot in the top. You're just gonna click that. It's gonna be on the right-hand side. It just pops in just like this. You're gonna take the other end of this, and you're gonna slot it in right here. And then we're gonna undo this. And this is also going to come, we're gonna run it down this way. This is gonna go in this bottom slot as well. And we're gonna undo this one, which is our last fan connector. We're gonna run this one right here. Okay, now, with that, all of our cables are ready to be connected on the other side. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is hook up our USB 3.0. There's a little nub at the top. I'm gonna go from 90 degrees so you don't bend any pins. Just gonna pop it in just like that, okay? Really easy. Next one is our SATA connection for our SSD. Just basically going top in, click it in just like that. We have the reset switch, power switch, and the hard drive. We're gonna start with the hard drive. So the hard drive was gonna go right there. Reset switch is gonna go right there. And the one that says power switch is gonna go right there. And this is what it'll look like when it's completely all hooked up. Next up is our 2 fan headers. Click in just like that. Again, little lip. There's a little lip that protects it. It's gonna slip it in just like that. Then lastly is HD audio. This is only keyed. You can see there's actually a pin that's been filled. There's only one way it'll go, and it goes right with the HD audio pointed up in the left-hand corner right here, just like that. So the last one we're gonna do is the RGB. It's 3-pinned, it only goes in one way. You're just gonna, this one can be kind of a pain. You wanna go straight up and down And now all our front panel connectors are connected. And now what we're gonna do is turn this over, do one more pass at cable management, then we'll continue to move forward. Now we've got all of our cable management done. Again, we're just creating things into channels. You got to watch me do that in speeded up mode, but we've basically got plenty of room now. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn this over and install our cable extensions, our GPU, and then our PSU, and then the build is done. Okay, so first cable extension we have right here. Now I will show you how to do cable combs a little later on. Again, these are Asia Horse. These are optional. If you do not want to use these, all you do is skip this entire step, go to the PSU part, and then instead of plugging these into the PSU cable, you'll just plug those into the motherboard specifically. But this right here is our 24-pin CPU connection, so we're gonna plug this in first. So there's one connection right here. It's right over here on the right-hand side. I'm gonna push it in. I'm gonna make sure it gets a nice solid snap. I'm gonna take this, you're gonna route this through, pulling it tight and then down. It should look like that. This AiO, depending on how you installed it, there's a connection up there in the top right. And that, depending on where this AiO is, you might actually have to unscrew it and move it because the screws can actually block this. So, and that's easy. It's just lightening these and then these can shift left and right. So if you have an issue when you're putting this in and it's blocking you from being able to put this cable in, that's how you fix it. And all we're gonna do for this cable is we're just gonna take this, top left, just like this. This goes right there, snaps in. Make sure you push it all the way in. And we're gonna route this one in the top left, just like that. And that looks like that. Now, we get to have the fun part, peel the AiO. It's all shiny now. And now we install our GPU. So for the GPU installation, we have a little cable, we have a little screw we need to undo right here. And then these lift up, and then these break out. Now you gotta be careful. You basically want to bend them in and out until they pop out, and they will come out. I'm just going to twist them. There you go. We just want to remove these top two. Eventually, it will come out. There's one. Remove the top one, and then work on the bottom one. You just rock it back and forth. Eventually, it comes out. And then you don't want to do the other ones unless you have other drives to put in there. Okay. So there we go, that's ready. This is loose, so we can put that in there. Now, let's grab our GPU and get that installed. Okay, so we're gonna pop this out of the box. Our graphics processing unit. We're gonna take our graphics processing unit and pop it out. Now, depending on what GPU you have, the thing that might be different, the number of these power connectors, there might be 3 if you're using a 3080. There might be, if you're using an older GPU, there might be 3 or 2. And depending on the type of connection, you can end up with like 3 pins like this or 4 pins like that. So there's gonna be some different options. It's pretty straightforward, but I just wanna let you know, not every card is going to look like this. There you go, next one. This is a lot of peel. Here we go. Now we're just gonna slip this in. Okay, I lied. We're gonna remove this. Remove this completely, depending on the GPU. Now, we are going to get this in like that. Okay, then now put this back in like so. Especially if you're using a heavier GPU, you have these screws that look like this. They come, and these are specifically for screwing down your GPU and adding these for extra GPU is installed. Now, last part, there is actually some more peel. So let's talk about the last little bit of cable combs and how you install the cable combs. Again, you don't have to do this for your build if you don't want to, but again, they make your build look pretty. So one thing I always do is just check, make sure that you're putting in the cable combs the right way. And then we have little 4-pin ones. I'm gonna stick 4 of these on each one of these. So I'm just gonna quickly, and all you do is just put them on each individual piece like so. There you go, you got your cable combs like that. And this is how I would have installed them on the other ones. Just gonna do 4 on each comb. Just like that, one more. There we go. Okay, so we got 4 on this one. We do the exact same thing on our red one. We're doing red just to splash up the colors. Again, this is the kind of cool thing, looking at your options for different cable extensions. If you want to mix and match, sometimes that means you have to get different sets, but we're just gonna make this look pretty, so we're gonna do a bunch of different colors. Okay, now what we're doing is we're just spacing these out so they match. Just the same thing, it just makes it a little easier. Want these to go pretty good distance down the 3 that are pretty well spaced near the top, and then the bottom one, which quite a bit. Just to keep the splash, what we're gonna do is what's called training our cable. I'm just gonna bend it a little bit into a circle. Just pop it in, and then pop this down in the little slot below, like so. Start the bend, just to get it kind of trained. Same thing, pop that in that little slot down below. Run that one in right there. And you got some nice clean looking cables. Now, if you want to know a little trick, if you're like, oh, I want to keep these to stay, you can take one of these little 3-pins like this. So once you've got them kind of run, in that large gap, pull them out again like this. And then down here near the bottom, take one of them and like just basically put one in between each, like this. And that way, what it'll do is it'll keep your spacing for you. There you go, you got them so they're kind of spaced now. And then now you've got that, you can run these back down. You've got something that kind of keeps your spacing for you. Okay, so now our PC is basically set up. This is what the front's gonna look like. Let's turn it over and get in our PSU. Now, before we get too far in this, the last thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna basically control our cables for the power supply. What I like to do is down here at the bottom, there's a little gap I'm gonna throw a zip tie into. And I wanna have the lip. You see this little nub right here? You wanna make sure that is up. So I'm gonna basically make sure that's up, and then I'm gonna screw, zip tie this down like that. And then the same thing over on this side, we have a couple of the little holes here on the left. I'm gonna pop those through like this, and then just run this into it, and then zip tie this down too. And there you go. Now we have all of our cables ready to go here. And we're gonna have the nub up, so that way it can fit in there, just like that. Okay, a very important part of every new PSU when you open it up is to get it out like this. As soon as it comes out, take a big whiff. It's so bad, but you should do that every time. It's super important. So here is what you're going to need for the PSU. You've got 4 screws. This comes with the PSU right here. Your PCIe cable, you'll know it because it has 2 of these at the split and then one that's connected like this. It is also labeled here on the side. It says PCIe. And then on the other side, there's no label on this, but that's the part that goes in the PSU. Next cable you'll need is CPU. It's actually labeled CPU. The other way you'll know it is it's able to split here in the center. I'm not gonna split it, but you can split this in 2, but that's the CPU and it's labeled that way. The side that's not labeled is the part that goes in the PSU. This is your 24-pin ATX. It's big, it's the only one like this, and then it's split. This is the part that goes in the PSU. This is a SATA. It's got 3 pins there, depending on how many things you have, like hard drives. Like we have an SSD we're gonna plug this into, so that's why we need this. Certain AIOs and other things also require power from this thing. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna flip this up. We're gonna connect all of our stuff into this. first one we have is we're gonna grab our CPU, which is labeled CPU on it. And on the case, it says CPU. So we're gonna plug in the CPU right here. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab motherboard, the motherboard connector. It's the one that's split. That's the part that plugs into the PSU. The way this is gonna go is it's gonna go one up here and weirdly so, one down here. So connect the first one down here. Then we're gonna put the other one up here. Okay, there we go. And next up, we have PCIe. We're gonna plug that into one where it says VGA, just like that. Then the last one we're gonna do is a SATA. We're gonna plug that into SATA and Molex right there, okay? And then what you're going to do, you're gonna grab your PC, and it's gonna go into this little section right here. Now, because we cable managed, it should be nice and easy to kind of slip it in there. We're in, oop. I'm taking this, oh geez, that's what we got. There we go. And just like that, now it's in. That was super good. Pop this up. Line up the holes. Grab our handy dandy trusty screwdriver. Okay, now if your power switch is like this, make sure you hit it to 0 just to make sure it's off. You want to keep it off. Now for the last part of the build. Ugh. Time to get all these last big giant cables all plugged in. Now what I'm gonna do is there's a space here at the top, up here, and that's the stuff that where I'm gonna kind of stick extra cables. So first one we're gonna do is take this big giant motherboard one and shove it as far down there as possible. And we're gonna take this and connect this to here. Now, if you did not use a cable extension, this part that I'm connecting into the cable extension right now would go directly into the motherboard. Okay, so there's that one. That cable is now connected. Next thing we have is our CPU. So we're gonna take this and shove this way down into this little corner down here, as much as we can. We're gonna run this around and plug this into this right here. Plug that in, put it back in, kind of push it down like that. Make sure that these are all the way in. That's important. There we go. Okay, so that's all in. Then, last thing we're gonna do is take the SATA. We have one SATA we worry about, so we're gonna take the one that's at the far end and plug this into it like this. There you go. There's your SATA. And nobody's SATA when you plug that in. We're gonna shove that down there. And then the last cables we're gonna do, and you want these to have a lot of room. You want these to be able to move. So that's why I have a tendency not to zip tie them down, is your GPU, just because you wanna be able to adjust and make them look pretty. So I'm gonna grab those, and you're gonna find the little clip on the top. Just like that. Last little clip on the top, and they're clipped one way. Grab this, clip on the top, just like that. And remember, they're attached to your cable extensions. You just want these to have motion because you're going to mess with them in the front to make them look good. So there, your entire PC is cable managed, built, and ready to go. This is what it should look like. And then the final test is to take your case and make sure, look at that, beautiful. Pops right in. No problem. Plenty of room. Like a pro. Now, before we turn it on, make sure, and this is what I was talking about. See how we have movement here? So if we wanna make sure the cables look nice, we wanna make sure that these have room to move. And again, I'm trying to make sure they stay flat, so that's what I'm doing here. Get that on. And then lastly, grab our dust filter. Pop that on. And there we have a completed PC. Does it work? HDMI. Grab our power. And just for now, we got a network cable, just to make sure that's good. And we're gonna turn on, and we're gonna turn it on. And there we go. And just like that, following your step-by-step guide, we have a completed and finished MacCube 110 Deep Cool inspired red, black, and white build, which hopefully you, if you're following along with this build, are at the exact same step. Now, you might be curious, hey, Roby, just turning it on isn't enough. I'm gonna do this. Just turning it on isn't enough. And just so you know, it does post, and you're gonna see that right here because it is posted. So it is good to go there. So we're showing that here. Now that it's up, you might be asking, Roby, well, now what do I do? I just have a working machine. Well, luckily enough, you can check out our video right here, which will walk you through how to set up Windows, or if I wanna enable XMP, or I wanna enable DOCP, all of that stuff is in this video that you can check out that'll walk you through that entire process. Well, that is it, guys. We have shown you how to build an entire PC in the MACU 110 step-by-step from end to end. I hope that you enjoyed this process. I hope you were able to follow along. I hope we made this guide thorough enough for you to see Intel, AMD, whatever. Now you might have a question like, Roby, you've got a completely built PC. What do I do now? Well, luckily, we have an entire video, which you can check out right here over on the Robeytech channel, which has everything you need to do to install Windows, overclock your RAM, or enable XMP or DOCP, how to set up your hard drive, how to install all that sort of stuff. So check that out, and that'll get you all the way running and good to go. I'd love to know down in the comments below what you thought of this video. Was there anything that we glossed over? Was there anything we could have done better? Was there stuff that you didn't think was clear? Again, we were trying to make this super generic, so I'd love to know if showing you Intel, AMD, and all that stuff was super helpful. And also, please let us know on social media. If you use this guide, send us a picture of your rig. We'd love to celebrate with you because I love doing things like this and helping you build PCs. Now, while you're down there, make sure you slap that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring that notification bell so you get a notification each and every time we go live here on this channel. Guys, this has been absolutely awesome. We hope you enjoyed this. Enjoy your new machine, and we will see you on the next build.